welcome. Tonight we have a special guest from the Governor's Council candidate pool. Governor's Council we want to talk about tonight because it's one of the most influential positions you can have because you're helping pick the governors that'll be there for many, many decades. But yet most people have no idea what it is or how it works. So hopefully tonight we'll get to learn about the Governor's Council and about Francis, our candidate. Why don't we start with an introduction?
Thanks, Al. My name's Frank Crimmins. My legal name is Francis T. Crimmins, Jr. But I go by Frank for the most part. And I'm from Stoughton, Massachusetts. I'm a married father of 4 children. I have 4 grandchildren. I live with my wife in Stoughton, where I have a law practice. I'm a retired judge. I've been in law since 1981. I'm going to make sure I silence this microphone here. I grew up in Stoughton, and I learned how to use this cell phone and to shut it off. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And I had occasion to go to Zavarian Brothers High School. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to Harvard College. I graduated from Harvard in '77, cum laude. By that time, I knew I wanted to go into law. I had to try to figure out a way to do that, like a lot of people, and got a job working days, and I went to law school nights at Suffolk University Law School. After a nationwide search, I was hired by my father to work in the family real estate and insurance business days, but that was a commission-only business, a tough business, and I worked days, went to law school nights. When I got out of law school in 1981, I passed the bar, opened up a law practice in the town of Stoughton. I got involved in town politics and town civic affairs right away. I joined a lot of groups. My family was active in that, my father, so that was my mentor. In 1982, a year after starting law practice, I ran for the Stoughton Board of Selectmen, lucky enough to win. I served a term for 3 years from 1982 to 1985. In 1985, I ran for town moderator. I was fortunate enough to win town moderator, and I ran for 7 more consecutive one-year terms till 1992, where I got a great opportunity that then Governor Weld appointed me as a judge of the district court, where I became the Associate Justice of the Stoughton District Court in 1992. Now, when you're an Associate Justice of a court, sometimes you sit at that court and sometimes you don't. That was pretty much a one-judge court, so the first justice sat there, and I didn't get there too much, so I got assignments all over southeastern Massachusetts, and I served in the various district courts in southeastern Massachusetts, including at some time the Milford District Court. But for the most part, I served my first year, most of it at the Quincy District Court. Then I did a stint in Boston at the Roxbury District Court, the Dorchester District Court, the West Roxbury District Court. Then I came down into Brockton. I had Brockton District Court, I had Taunton District Court, Attleboro District Court, Wareham District Court, Taunton District Court. Different times I'd make a pit stop at the Stoughton District Court, and I served in the other district courts in Norfolk County, Plymouth County, Bristol County, sometimes Barnstable County, and it was 2001, the first justice retired, so I was appointed as the first justice of the Stoughton District Court, where I sat from 2001 to 2010, when I retired from being a judge after nearly 18 years. My kids came along at a time where we, like a lot of people, had to figure out how to pay for college. We were taking care of parents, like a lot of people. So I tied my wife up a lot. And with the income that I was making, that wasn't enough to do the college thing. So like a lot of people, I did a pivot, and I retired from the bench in 2010, and I accepted a position as town manager in the town of Stoughton, where I served for a cup of coffee for till about two years, 2 months, till 2012, where I also started up a private law practice. I left the town manager position, focused on the law practice, and a couple of years later, town of Avon offered me a position to be the town administrator, where I could still practice law and serve as a town administrator. So from 2014 to 2018, I was the town administrator in Avon. It was a great position, just like Stoughton before that. And after 2018, I returned to the full-time practice of law. I do business as ab initio Elder Law Solutions. It's an estate planning and elder law practice. Ab initio is a Latin term. It means from the beginning. It's not a retail term. It's more geared to let lawyers know that I'm not a retail practice. They refer estate planning, elder law things to me, and that's gone well. And so I conducted that practice as I do up till this point in time. I started, once I left town positions, I was able to dabble again in political life, because when you're in a town office, you can't do that. If you're the manager or administrator, that doesn't win you too many points with the select board. So, but in 2022, then Governor Baker appointed me as the chair of the State Ballot Law Commission, and I served with my members on that commission until 2024. This year, earlier, we had, our work is mostly on obscurity. We had the Trump ballot law challenge earlier in the year. But sometime around March, I believe, April, I resigned from that position so I could run for the open seat on the Governor's Council for District 2. And that's a little bit of my background.
That's a very intense background.
Well, I've had a chance to be in a few things, yeah.
Frank, I always start to show off with a basic question. I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
If you believe that in the Constitution, no matter where you live, and if you believe in the rule of law, I think you will find something in my candidacy that resonates, because the traditions in our country are under attack, and some of the most revered institutions and traditions that we have are under attack. And that is seen also in the judicial system and the public's relationship to the judicial system. And I'm running for this office to reinforce and protect the rule of law that's enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. So I go around every day with, where is it here? With the Constitution. I give out a couple of these every day. I believe in the U.S. Constitution. I believe in the Massachusetts Constitution. And as you know, when you're a judge or a judicial officer or a sworn police officer, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And you take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And sometimes you see people in the judicial specter that seem like they don't seem to understand their role in the Constitution, because the judicial branch is non-political nonpartisan. It's supposed to be independent of the legislative branch and the executive branch. Not because I say so, the
The book
Constitution
says so.
Right. And in the Constitution of the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780, which preceded this one by 7 years, was the first document around in the world that had a third branch of government independent of the other two. And it's right in the book. We had John Adams and others to thank for that. And in that book, we're supposed to keep that separate. So whether you're in Milford or Stoughton or Framingham or Attleboro or Brockton or Hopkinton, I believe that you would support my candidacy if you believe that that is important and believe in the rule of law, because when we don't have the public having confidence in the rule of law, they take matters into their own hands and they reject the decisions of courts. And our system is based on, as you know, what's called the consent of the governed. We all agree as U.S. citizens to abide by the judicial forums that are proscribed by this document. And when people lose confidence in those decisions because they don't think they're fair, we all suffer. And when people don't do that, they give the law enforcement community a difficult time. We have a move to defund police. We have people that, because of that movement, crime has gone up. We have kids that are, forget about what happens in school, they're afraid to get to school, get home from school because some of the things that can happen. Look at what's going on in Aurora, Colorado in the last 2 weeks, where gangs from Venezuela have taken home housing. Look what happened in Springfield, Illinois this past week, where rival gangs were doing the same thing in Springfield, Illinois. And it's happening all over the country, and we have to support that. So I thank you for the question, but I'm as in touch with Milford as I am with any other community in this district, which includes 37 communities. And a matter of fact, as I said, I've been to the Milford court. I know people in Milford, and I'm in touch with people in all the different communities, and I hope to earn their support and help restore trust in the judicial process.
Is it a surprise to you when people say, we defunded the police and crime went up?
I know it's happened, but it's not a surprise to me. It seems like that was a very foreseeable outcome.
I stick
I
my
just don't
finger in a
get it.
light socket and it hurts.
Right.
Why is that a surprise?
Right. I just don't get how that caught on with any of the people. But all you have to do is, when you have some type of a movement that has a cause based upon some perceived inequity, that can gain momentum. And when that gains momentum and reaches a critical mass, we have seen the fallout from that. If you take a trip to places like New York City, where one of my 4 kids went to college, I could see the difference between what the atmosphere and public safety feel was when he first started and when he graduated just this past May. It was a whole lot different. You used to see members of the blue team on every corner. You felt safe. You could go out at night. You felt safe. A lot of those restaurants have curtailed their hours and the whole thing. And it's not just for the tourists that go, it's the people that live there, unfortunately. And you see that everywhere.
Well, even in Milford, I do feel proud that we've had 2 demonstrations about our police force, both positive.
Right.
You know, because we really appreciate Chief Tassino and the members of his staff taking care of us.
And I do as well, and that's why I was endorsed by the Mass Chiefs of Police Association, and I was also endorsed by the Fellowship of the Massachusetts Police Officers statewide.
And as a former moderator, you'll appreciate this. We had one instance where town meeting was absolutely paralyzed. During the budget discussion, we had a town meeting member make a motion that we defund the police. 230 people went silent. Couldn't even get a second on the motion. It was so foreign to what we thought. Because you would think that at least 2 people out of 200 plus people would go along with it.
Right.
Nobody. The moderator finally said, lacking a second, we move on.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Governor's Council, what is it?
Well, going back to that Constitution of 1780, we had a group of people in our colonies that broke away from the British Crown and wanted to make sure that when we started a government here, we didn't create monarchs and kings and queens. And so they made sure there were checks and balances. And then that Constitution of 1780 for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there was, in the executive branch, an 8-person executive council, it was called. It's morphed into what's now called the Governor's Council, but in the Constitution it was called the Executive Council. And that council of 8 members was put there to make sure there were checks and balances on the awesome power of the governor to do, among other things, to fill vacancies in the court system. And so that 8-member group was to be elected from the plebiscite, and there were 8 separate districts, so the public would have somebody to vet and give advice and consent to any nominees made by the governor in his or her term. So, for example, in the U.S. Constitution, as you know, when the President of the United States nominates somebody to fill a vacancy in the United States Supreme Court or one of the inferior courts, that nominee has a hearing before the U.S. Senate. In our state, of course, we didn't have a federal constitution to go by for a sample. John Adams and the founders came up with the idea of having an executive council of 8 members to give the advice and consent, and that has continued to this day. So when the governor nominates somebody to fill a vacancy on one of the various courts in the trial court department of 7 different departments of the trial court, or a clerk magistrate, or the other people under the jurisdiction of the governor's council, that nominee goes before the governor's council. And if he or she gets a majority vote, they go on to get confirmed and sworn in. And if they don't, they do not get confirmed and sworn in. And that public hearing is the only time the public gets to hear any position about a nominee, because before they're nominated, anything that happens with the governor is confidential. And the Judicial Nominating Committee, that's confidential. The public never sees that. The Governor's Council meetings are public. You can watch them live stream by going to mass.gov, get the link to Governor's Council, and you can watch the hearings. And those hearings go forward. Now, as I mentioned, I was a former judge. I went through that process. I appeared and testified before the Governor's Council, and that's how I became a judge in the government.
Since we have you here,
Yep.
It's no longer speculation. We can ask, Francis, you decided you want to be a judge.
Yes.
What was the first step you had to take? Is there an application? Is there somebody before the governor's office? Where do you start?
Great question, because a lot of people, even lawyers, don't know that question. But one day I'm reading the Journal, that's the Bible for practicing attorneys, is the Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly. Back then it was a newspaper only. Now, of course, you have an electronic edition in addition, and I get both. But I saw that Judge George Sullivan from the Stoughton District Court was retiring. And I was surprised to see it because he wasn't of the age I thought that he would be retiring. But in the paper there was an announcement, and the announcement was from the office of from the governor that there would be that vacancy. Now, at the time period we're talking about, okay, we're talking 1992 is when I got sworn in. I see this in 1991. The governor at the time was William F. Weld. He won in the election of November 1990. He was sworn in January of 1991. And I saw this sometime in the middle of 1991. And there was a notice from Governor Weld's Judicial Nominating Committee. That's a committee he appointed in his office that was supervised under the jurisdiction of his then governor's counsel to the governor, not the governor's counsel, but counsel to the governor, who happened to be Robert Cordy, who later became Mr. Justice Cordy on the Supreme Judicial Court. But at the time, he was Governor Weld's legal counsel. So step one, the Judicial Nominating Committee, or the initials JNC, they announce that there's a vacancy. And they say applications are available in the office of the governor, attention Judicial Nominating Committee. And you get that application. And the application is a very involved, detailed paperwork process where you are asked about your background, biological information, family information. You're asked about your practice, what type of practice, what cases have you had, what cases have gone to trial. They ask you some questions. They ask you what your most important trials were. They'll ask about what people can we contact that would know something about your competencies in the law, that type of thing. And you're given a deadline. And at the time, I got my application in by the deadline, and then the Judicial Nominating Committee screened an awful lot of people. There were probably, well, I know there were over 100 plus lawyers that applied for that position. And their committee, it was called at the time the Boston Regional Committee, was formed to be in charge of vacancies in Norfolk County. And they screen those applications.
So the Judicial Nominating Committee, is that for District 2 or is that statewide?
Great question. No, the Judicial Nominating Committee is the governor's group for statewide. Then they break it down depending on how the governor organizes it. So Governor Weld changed the system significantly from his predecessor, Governor Dukakis, and he set up these regional committees. There was a Boston Regional Committee, there'd be a Southeastern Mass Committee, there'd be a Central Mass Committee, Northeastern Mass Committee, Western Mass Committee, and you applied with that group. So there would be about up to 21 people on that committee. And those 21 people would take the applications and go through the applications, and they would decide who would get an interview. So the next hurdle you had to do after your application was you had to get an interview.
With them?
Yes, and they didn't give everybody an interview. A certain amount of the members in a subcommittee had to give a thumbs up to give you an interview. Then that interview got you in front of that committee, and then they assembled and asked you questions. After that interview, which is a tough thing to get the interview, but after that interview, they vote whether or not to keep you alive or kick you off the island, you know? So if you're fortunate enough to stay alive in the pool, you know, there may be another round.
So if you make it through the JNC,
Yeah.
then you go to the governor's office, or where do you go next?
So if you make it through the JNC, the governor's office will charge them with, give us, for example, 5 of the best applications you got to give to us, and we'll look through them. All right?
Now, is it 5 for District 2, or is it 5 for family court? When you say give me 5 of the best?
Yeah, it can be different. It doesn't have to be 5. On my particular one, it was 5, but they wanted 5 nominees to come out of that committee, and they went to the governor's lawyer. Okay, then the governor's lawyer conducted interviews. And you needed to get an interview with the governor's lawyer at the time. That was Mr. Justice Cordy, when he was Attorney Cordy, the general counsel for the governor. And then they go through, if they think that they're going to nominate you, you then have a background check. And that background check includes having the state police do a background check on you to make sure that you're a person that they're not going to be surprised finding out things about. And they also want a credentials check by the Bar Association of the Professional Standards Committee to see if you meet the requirements of somebody that will be holding that type of position. And they wait for that. If those things come back all right, then the governor's has a decision whether the governor is going to give it to his council or not, or take the recommendation of his council or not. Some governors will pick themselves, others have their legal counsel do it, but of the 5, they'll make a decision as who they're going to nominate, and they'll let you know that they will intend to nominate you, subject to, a further background check.
No, it's like we offer a candidate a job, but it's dependent on passing the background check.
Yes. And so you get through that process, and before it's announced to the public, that's the point really of no return. They say, hey, if there's anything you want us to know, now's the time.
We're going to find out anyway.
Yeah,
you might as well.
now's the time.
What is the minimum criteria to be a judge?
Great question. It depends on the administration. Some administrations will be very specifically and announce their guidelines, and they will say things like, a minimum of 10 years as a member of the bar. They may have other types of things. First of all, they want you to be a member of the bar, having been admitted to the bar, not just a graduate of law school, because people come into the state from, other states, that type of thing. And they will go through that process and let you know. So it is rare that you're going to find somebody that just started practice and he or she becomes a judge. But there's a limit to how much they can screen and what they know about people and all that. And that's why that process is done pretty much in a confidential manner. And when they finally announce that they intend to nominate somebody for a position, that announcement is made, and then they ask the governor's council to conduct a hearing on that nomination.
Now, when you're appointed as a judge, is there a specialty assigned to it, or are you a judge, a plain judge that can hear cases of all sorts of areas?
Great question. We have 7 departments of the Massachusetts Trial Court. I was a district court judge. There's also a juvenile court. There's a housing court. There's a land court. There's a probate and family court. there's a Superior Court, there's the Appeals Court. Those are the trial departments. Then, of course, there's the Supreme Judicial Court. Those different courts require different competency levels, because within each of those different departments of the trial court, they have different subject matter jurisdiction. Now, when I say, for example, the probate and family court, the probate and family court does everything from estate administrations and fiduciary litigation regarding trusts and breach of fiduciary duties and guardianships and conservatorships and those type of things. And then, it's then you have that symbol, the ampersand, so that's the probate side. Then the family court side, completely separate from that. The family court side is the domestic relations part. So that's divorce, complaints for separate support, issues about custody, visitation, child support, restraining orders.
But I guess my question, Francis, is you're appointed a judge.
Yes.
You are a judge. And Stoughton Court has a primary judge, and he
Yes.
gets ill.
Yes,
Somebody's got to sit in for him.
yes.
Can any judge sit in for him, or does it have to be one with a specialty in family law or estate law?
Great question. The district court has a jurisdiction that's proscribed by statute, and it has a subject matter jurisdiction, just like it does at the Milford District Court. So any district court judge can sit in, and he or she will get matters that will be a wide breadth of matters. When you're at the Milford District Court, whether it's Monday morning or today, we're here on a Tuesday, there's going to be arraignments for people alleged to have committed crimes where they were arrested last night. There's going to be, and at those arraignment sessions, people are going to be put on notice that they have the right to be represented by counsel. If they cannot afford one, one will be appointed for them by the court. The Commonwealth will have an opportunity to request bail if they want. Defense counsel will be appointed to represent the defendant if there is a request for bail by the Commonwealth.
Sorry to interrupt, but when you step in to the district court,
Yes,
and you could have a family matter come up, a real estate matter come up, a contractual, it can be all different types of cases.
most definitely. Most definitely.
How do you get the experience in all the different, there's 7 different rooms to go into.
No, not 7 different rooms for the average public. There are different type of things. Like, for example, if someone is going for a divorce and they're from Milford, they're going to the Worcester County Probate and Family Court.
Okay,
They're not going to the district court,
Okay.
and they're not going to the juvenile court,
'Cause I
and
was
they're
gonna
not
say-
going to the land court. It depends on the subject matter jurisdiction is the type of case, and venue is which court you go to when you
So
have
if you're
that.
going to a special Worcester Court or Milford Court, the odds are you're going to get a plethora of the same type of cases.
You will get a lot of cases that have similarities, but they're all different. They might be charged the same. They're all different. Picture an assault and battery where it's 2 people that bump into each other in a restaurant where someone's accused of bumping into somebody and as a result of some argument, and there's an assault and battery, as opposed to an assault and battery where 2 people are swapping punches for, 2 minutes at each other. Both of them are called assault and batteries, but there's a big difference.
There I stand humbled because I could never do your role. Because
Well,
somebody who would pick on a child or cause harm to a child,
right.
I don't know that I could be purely objective. You know, there's a lot of compassion you have for people and giving them chances, but when you see people hurting children, I don't know how you keep a clear mind.
Well, there's difficulties, but the principle is people have rights that are right here.
In the book.
You're innocent until proven guilty on the criminal side. On the civil side, there's other standards. It's not the same burden that has to be met, but there is a burden. But the point is, in our system, the people on the street encounter don't decide the outcome. It happens in a court. No one on the street gets to be the police officer, the judge, the jury by themselves. When there's a alleged altercation on the street, if an officer sees it in person, he or she can make an arrest. If it's not and it's reported, they can make out a complaint, and somebody has to go in front of a clerk at a courthouse to swear out a complaint, and the clerk has to find there's probable cause for the complaint to issue. That's different in our system. In other systems, people say on the street, this guy did this to this guy, kill him.
I remember when I was traveling in the Soviet Union, the system was different. It went, first we execute, then we accuse, then we try.
Right.
And it was like,
Right,
okay, what happened to innocent until proven guilty?
right,
No, execute first,
right.
and you have to appreciate the wisdom of the book.
Yes.
Now, you've walked us through, the governor sends a number of people to the governor's council. First of all, there's 8 of them.
8 members of the governor's council.
Isn't that dangerous? What happens when you get 4 and 4?
Great question. The lieutenant governor breaks the tie.
So it's like the vice president stepping into the Senate.
Yes.
Okay. Because I was thinking about that. If it's 4 and 4, who casts the deciding
The
vote?
lieutenant governor is the presiding officer, yes.
Now, how many judges are there in Massachusetts? Is it like 300 or?
No, there's about 480
Oh, wow.
in the trial court. And
And-
in the most populous court, of course, is the district court.
Now, once you're appointed a judge, you can stay till you're 70, is that right?
You can stay till a maximum of age 70, yes.
And you can't get fired unless you
Well-
do something egregious.
You're a judicial officer, and there's a process of discipline, but in the common context of what you're thinking of, no, you're not fired. You're a judicial officer for the length of that appointment up till age 70.
So if you are elected, how long do you serve?
Every governor's councilor has a coterminous 2-year term.
That's it?
2 years, yes. And it goes to the voters. Again, that was the system. You go to the voters.
So every
You-
2
you-
years,
You're not there for life. It's not by fiat. You don't say, I'm better than this one or this one. The voters decide.
it just seems awful short period that, I had heard that if you're a House of Representatives and Congress member, the day you win your election, you take the weekend off and then you start raising money for the next one.
The way elections are today, you have to have access to considerable sums of money. I mean, look at this district that I happen to be running in. It's 37 communities. Just picture, you know
How
that.
do you even get to visit all of them?
Well, you do. I started a long time ago. I just didn't start, but I mean, picture this. Picture one stamp First class stamp, 73 cents. Picture an envelope and something with maybe two-sided printing in the envelope, and you send that out. It's close to $1 for one letter. That's one letter for one person in one community.
And we have 16,000 in Milford.
Right, so you can see where the money goes up. You know, you have postage, advertising, never mind the signs and that stuff. That's a much smaller amount than putting out mailings and things like that, and the electronic stuff and social media. So it costs a lot of money.
Now, when you're a governor's council member, how often do you work?
They meet, for the most part, on Wednesdays, and it's most Wednesdays throughout the year, and sometimes on occasion they have some other special meetings. Sometimes they'll take a Wednesday off, but it's generally Wednesday meetings. There's a public agenda, it's posted, people can see it. That's when you meet in a formal session. But then on top of that, you're preparing for those meetings, like anything else. So, you know, when you have members of the community that are on a council, on a committee, when you have other people that serve as a county commissioner, people on different boards and commission, they may have just one weekly meeting, or sometimes one bi-weekly meeting, but they're doing the work you have to do to prepare for that meeting, and so that's what takes a good amount of time.
How many candidates come before you in a year? Do you have any idea?
For
You're on the governor's council.
as a governor's council, well, if I'm fortunate enough to be on the governor's council, here's what you have. It depends on the vacancies. You know, in the last 2 years of the Baker administration, there was a huge amount of vacancies, just because the cohort of judges out there were of a certain age group, and they had a certain amount of years of service, so they were retirement eligible, so-called, and the remuneration had been adjusted, so there finally had been a pay raise, because a lot of people were waiting for a pay raise because their pension would be based on that pay raise in their last year, that type of thing.
How much is a governor's council member paid?
I should know the exact figure, but it's about 36,000.
30-some thousand?
Around 36,000 a year.
So it can't be full-time?
Nobody, I'm not doing this for a job. I don't.
Right.
I don't need the job. You know, I'm running for the reasons I'm running for the job. But you don't make a living being
A governor's
a
council.
governor's counselor.
You do it for the passion of doing it.
Yes.
Now, you say you meet once a week, but if you're looking at vacancies, are they mainly due to retirement, or do people step down for other reasons?
No, for the most part. For example, when you are appointed as an administrative judge on the Department of Industrial Accidents, you have a 6-year term or whatever, and you can get renewed. But then after a while, most people retire after a certain amount of time, so there's going to be a vacancy. I mean, if you're an attorney in the Milford area and the presiding judge has attained a certain age, and let's say that judge gets to an age where they're within 3 years of retirement, because the max is to 70, but they might get out before age 70 years. And if it's known that particular judge is going to retire in 3 years at a certain age, you might start thinking, hey, when that happens, I'm going to apply for that job. So there's no magic amount. But when somebody ages out, that is the opportunity to apply. When people have the job, they're there for a certain amount of time. I mean, I was appointed young. I got out relatively young, but I still served for more than most people serve. I served for 17 and a half years. Most judges serve for about 15 years. But whether it's 15 or 17 and a half or whatever, they serve for longer than the governor that nominates them. And that's why it's so important who we have in those positions, because they're there for a long time.
Well, I mean, as we're seeing in the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court,
Yeah,
you know, the presidents, I mean, this is terrible to say, come and go
right.
in a relatively fixed, short, either
Yes.
4 or 8 years.
Yes,
The Supreme Court justices are there for decades.
yes, yes.
So to me, it's the same thing on a more narrow scale. But if the governor gets an appointment approved, that judge could be there for 20, 30 years.
For sure. And they only have one hearing, Al. One hearing.
Oh, is that right?
It's that first hearing
Wow.
before the governor's council. They're not subject to review. You don't get a chance to say, come to this meeting, I want to hear what you think about X, Y, or Z.
So now, out of the 400 and plus judges, how many, do you have an idea of how many, I want to say retire, but vacate a year? Is it 10%? Is it 20%?
I would say in total, it can be as high as 10%.
So that's 450.
Out of about 450, there could be up to 45 vacancies. Not an exact number, but it
but-
depends on,
But that comes
the-
down
the
to
age.
one a week
yeah.
coming in front of the governor's council.
Governor's council had 3 before it last week.
How do they have enough time to vet these people?
Well, that's the issue. You have to give it the amount of time it's due, and some people say sometimes they don't give it enough time.
That's what amazes me. You're getting paid for 1 day a week on a position that's going to affect my life for decades.
Yes, yes.
Why wouldn't we have it full-time and say, now we want people, you know, it's no longer, Francis, I don't want you to be part-time. I want your sole focus to be picking out the right judge for the job, and you got 5
Yeah.
days, not one.
Yeah. There's,
What's the logic?
there is, well, the logic is that there are some people that sort of shied away from the Constitution and didn't think we need them as much because they just want the elected governor to decide everything. And why put a bump in the road and have this vetting process? The governor doesn't have to explain to anybody why he or she in a particular administration
Pick
has
somebody.
nominated somebody. It's only the governor's council. And by the way, in addition to nominees for judicial vacancies and clerk's magistrate, the
Well,
governor's council have the
Don't
awesome.
they look at the guy, what do you call him? I used to think of the master sergeant, the magistrates, the ones that aren't the judge, but they
Right.
run the courthouse.
Yes, they do. A clerk magistrate is the person who's in charge of a courthouse and in charge of the record-keeping process at the courthouse and in charge of all the persons. It's a very important job. You know, when you're at Milford District Court, in addition to a judge in the clerk magistrate, you know, when the members of the public leave the parking lot, come in, you're greeted by security officers, and you see other court officers in the courthouse. You see people that are administrative staff for the clerk magistrate. You see people that are in the probation department. You see the members of the bar that are with the embedded office of the elected DA, Mr. Early, and the assistant district attorneys assigned there. You see the members of the defense bar that are both private counsel, privately retained, and the publicly appointed attorneys there. You have other people that are all part of that court system, and you have to make that whole thing work. And there are a lot of interested parties there. And I'm just saying, there's a lot to it. On the Governor's Council, remember, it's not just your appointments as judges and clerks. You have responsibilities on picking, giving advice and consent to the parole board, making decisions on commutations. That
How
process.
do you find time in a day to do that?
It depends on the case and the week, but you give it the amount of time each case deserves. In certain cases, obviously, take more time than others. And there's a lot to it. It's a very big responsibility. The public is generally unaware of what happens in the Governor's Council because it's not a political entity that the media seems to pay attention to. And with all the competition for people's time and attention today, it can get lost in the background that way.
How important is your political views to getting nominations?
With respect to nominations for who now?
For a judge.
Oh, my political views don't get in the way of anyone's nomination. Remember, the governor nominates, advice and consents with the Governor's Council. I want to know if they're competent in the skill set for the trial court that they're being appointed for. The skill set you need to be in the probate and family court is a different one for the land court. It's a different one for the district court. So number one, competent. Number two, do they have the right temperament? Do they want to be a public servant? Have they demonstrated that they have a passion for public service? Have they shown that in their life? Do they know the difference between somebody who's underrepresented and needs legal help and somebody who's overcharged on a particular thing? Do they have that sense that way? And do they understand this thing? And that's why I take the politics out, because when you go by this thing, the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that you take an oath to, as every sworn officer does, as every judicial officer does, you put the politics aside. It doesn't matter. Justice is supposed to be, that symbol of Lady Justice. Justice is blind. Doesn't matter who he or she is before you. You weigh the evidence and you come out a certain way. You leave the politics at the door. So it's not an important factor. And it's when some people think that it's getting that way, that's when we have attacks on the judicial system and the rule of law, and people lose confidence because they think it's no different than the other branches of government.
But I've always felt that we have an advantage in Massachusetts, because I have a hard time sometimes determining the difference between a liberal Republican Massachusetts person and a conservative Democrat. I mean, you've got the extremes.
Right.
But the majority seem to be in the middle.
Yes.
For me, I always admired Justice Kennedy because I could never figure him out.
Right.
And that to me was the model. He's not voting dogma to the right or the left all the time.
I told you I did a brief stint on the State Ballot Law Commission from 2022 to 2024. So I worked with my commission members in the office of the Secretary of State. And it wouldn't surprise you, or maybe it might surprise you, that right now, to your point, most people aren't in a political party. They want the freedom to decide themselves which way on a particular issue with the candidate. 63% of the voters in this state are unenrolled. 28% are registered as Democrats. 9% are registered as Republicans. But the overwhelming amount are unenrolled.
The term I hate, because I hate being called unenrolled.
Right.
I feel like I'm not participating. I
Right.
wish we could still use the old independent.
Right.
Because I find myself, on this show we have the liberal view and we have a show called the conservative view. Now, the liberals don't accept me because I'm too physically conservative. I serve on the finance committee of the town, and I really do believe you only spend the money you have. The Republicans don't accept me, so I can't be blue because I'm too physically conservative. I can't be red because I'm too socially aware. So I declared myself purple. Because again, I'll swing depending
Yes,
on the
yeah.
issue.
And the registration figures bear that out, that most of the electorate in the Commonwealth are purple.
I'd love to keep going on, but we're getting to the point where the show is coming to an end. Francis, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
You should vote for me from Milford because I support the people in Milford in their way of life. I support the problems we're having with migration and what it's doing to the community of Milford, Mass. I support the police department here in the law enforcement community and making it safe for the people in Milford to get on with their lives and be left alone and provide a life for their kids and their grandkids. Someone in Milford, like anywhere else in this district too, should support me because I believe that people should be accountable. And a big part of those things that affect our lives all come out of the court system. And I believe in making sure we have the rule of law in the court system and making the best men and women who are looking for those positions to be vetted and to ensure that we get the best people in those systems for that. I'm not running because I need this job. I'm a father, I'm a grandfather. I want my kids to have the same shot of bringing up their kids and give them the same shot my parents, were part of the greatest generation, gave me. I'm lucky. I had a great childhood. I've been able to have some successes. I'm one of 5 kids. I want to be able to do that for the next generation. I have been a lawyer since '81. I'm not saying I'm a rocket scientist, but I know this stuff. I've been in the game for a long time. I've been a judge for almost 18 years. I've been a lawyer since '81. I'm going on my 43rd year. I know what it takes to be a good judge. I know what it takes to be a good clerk magistrate. I know what it takes to hold those positions in Milford, just like every other community. And that's why I'm hoping that the people of Milford will support me as their governor's counselor in District 2. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And as always, I've made a promise that I'll never ask you to vote for a specific candidate. Not my job. But I'll beg you to become educated on each candidate. Choose the one that makes the most sense to you, but please get out and vote. And to our 6 loyal viewers, thank you. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you for coming.